Welcome. This is the 2024 webinar, and it's a virtual dam inspection. So this is a brand new webinar. It will be made available on demand. So I'm going live right now. So we're going to be moving very quickly. We got well over 100 slides to go through. We're going to have a couple periods where we stop for questions. Do feel free to use the chat. So I'm going to be using that a lot today. I am flying solo here, so I will do my best to respond in a timely manner. Okay, well, here we go. First, I want to acknowledge where the funding for this came from. It's really funding from a partnership. It's between the governments of Canada, British Columbia, Canadian Agricultural Partnership, and a federal provincial territorial, which is a federal provincial territorial initiative. So we actually have quite a few parties involved with this, and they've certainly been listening to the agricultural community of dam owners and so forth. Welcome, we have more joining, so I'm going to do my best to keep letting you all in. So another acknowledgement is that in the interest of dam safety, many figures, photographs, basically a lot of the content we use is from a lot of different sources. The Association of Dam Safety Officials, other firms, Canadian Dam Association, and certainly the province of British Columbia. So I do want to make the disclaimer. The province of British Columbia is committed to maintaining and improving dam safety. However, opinions expressed here in this webinar, they're mainly mine, also others in our firm, and also third parties that have worked through this draft, but it is not necessarily those of the governments of Canada and British Columbia. So the other thing I want to make a disclaimer, Interior Dams, where I work, we are a third-party independent contractor to the province of BC, and we're an engineering company. So the things we say, we aren't necessarily the province of BC. So just to clarify that, I know a lot of people get confused with their name. So Zoom functionality. So if some of you are not familiar with Zoom, you can see there at the bottom left, you can unmute yourself. You should be able to at question periods. We're going to use the chat. So I want to use that as much as possible. If anyone's got questions, do send them to me. And when we get to question periods, I'm going to stop and try to respond to those. And during the virtual inspection, we really want to use that because everyone has to, it's an engagement thing. So we want everyone to be responding and seeing what they see on a virtual dam inspection. So moving forward, webinar objectives. So quickly, the main things we really want to look at is first review dam regulations. There is some guidance there as well. We want to understand the need for pre-inspection. So that's going to be a real main sort of thing I'm going to try to drive home today. To be knowledgeable about the tools and resources to use. So we're going to show you where to find checklists and things like that, and know how to document issues. So it is a virtual inspection. What we're going to be doing is focusing on formal inspections. So it is very similar to surveillance, but that is the main goal here today. So module content, introductions, we've already done that 5 minutes in. Review of dam safety regulations. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes looking at regulations, and then we're going to review dam safety resources and templates. So where do we find those? What do they look like? What's in them? And what can we expect? And how do we use those? So dam inspection, review, and preparation. So we really want to hammer that home. How to prepare before you go out to a formal inspection. Visual inspection exercise. So that's the main core of this. We are going to go through a whole inspection and think about, what do we write down? What are those things? What type of follow-up recommendation should we be making? And then finally, we're going to wrap up. And we do have a questionnaire that I would like to message out. And it's just a couple quick questions to help us direct the next resources that we put together. So, dam safety regulations. This is going to be the first sort of module of our webinar here today. So I think everyone is aware at this point that have a dam safety regulation. Came in around 2000. It was repealed and replaced in 2016. Lots of updates. A lot of those updates were because of past failures. Many of you might have heard of Testa Linden. Check out some of our previous webinars. Lots about why the changes and the things are in here. So we are only covering dam inspection today, but we're going to see how this is not only something we should be doing, but it's also a minimum requirement that's regulated for us to do. So in that regulation, there is a table that tells us all the activities we need to be doing. So this is the table. It's a very short regulation. It's only maybe 25 to 30 pages. Most of it is definitions. And here we go. We've got quite a few things in here. And, one, redetermined classification. If anyone can see what I'm circling there. That's what we did last week, Friday. So that one's going to be, actually, it's already a link available. And you can watch how to redetermine classification. We talk about how you can do that while you're doing an inspection. We'll see in a minute. And here we go. There's some other things. Conduct surveillance and conduct formal inspection. So we want to see how do we do that. So we have other webinars that go through the techniques of what to look for, how things fail, and so forth, even instrumentation monitoring and so forth. Today we are not focusing on that. That is more of a prerequisite for today. And even if you haven't done it, that's great, or that's fine. It's not going to impede on today's program, but I totally encourage you to check it out, watch those webinars back, and maybe watch this one again afterwards once it's on demand. So surveillance inspection, right? What is it? What's the difference? Why is there this differentiation between surveillance and formal inspection? Well, generally, they're just surveillance. So the Canadian Dam Association has a section called surveillance and surveillance procedures, and it just lumps all inspections and everything in there. But we know that there's various levels. We have weekly sort of checkups, or where we just look at them. We have sometimes video surveillance, things like that. Sometimes even flying drones out and doing it remotely. So surveillance, our dam safety regulation in BC separates out site surveillance and formal inspection. So one is the monitoring of a dam and surrounded or adjacent area to a dam, blah, 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 through visual observation. If there is instrumentation related to the dam, through systematic collection of that data. So this might be like an operator's stop by. You stop by once a week, you stop by once a month. This is a regulated thing. You have a frequency in the dam safety regulation you should be following as a minimum, and you collect that information. But formal inspection here is a little bit different. It is a thorough on-site inspection of the dam and dam site conducted by a person. So these are right in the dam safety regulation, and it says we have to do that typically annually. But some dams it's not annually, it could be biannually, and in some cases even more, but that's a minimum. Okay. So continuing on. Surveillance and inspection. There is a difference in terminology sometimes when we look at the Canadian Dam Association and we look at our BC regulation. So the CDA just calls them routine inspections, so sort of those little checkups. Our BC Dam Safety Regulation calls them site surveillance. So engineering inspections is what the CDA calls them. We recognize that you're not necessarily engineering. A lot of owners are experienced with dam safety and are going to these webinars, and they know what to look for. You can conduct the formal inspection yourself, and our regulation calls them formal inspections, and that's it. So we also have audits. Audits are a common thing as well. They are, our dam safety officers audit us once every 5 years, and so those look like surveillance or inspection sometimes, but those are not considered surveillance. That's just a check or an audit to make sure we are doing those things. So site surveillance typically conducted by dam owner. Formal inspections, oftentimes conducted by an engineer, by a third party. Oftentimes we do them on behalf of our clients. But the truth is, the owner can do that. So you as dam owners operators, if you have some experience and you believe it's appropriate, you can go ahead and do them yourself. So there's no requirement for a third party or an engineer or someone to do that. Oftentimes I recommend, if you're not sure, have an engineer do it, have them walk you through it, and then yeah, I mean, they already filled the first one out for you, and then you kind of have a pretty good idea as what to look for and use these resources. So surveillance and inspection. Dam thought, so this is right out of the Canadian Dam Association. Dam failures are often preceded by warning signs. The warning time can range from days to months to even years, or it could be minutes or hours. So without surveillance or inspection, we just never know if there's something going wrong with their dams. So we have to be surveillancing them. So a comprehensive visual inspection can identify most issues related to dam safety. And I would say this is very true. We do comprehensive dam safety um, reviews, and we do all these geotechnical tests and drilling and everything, but the most valuable way to review a dam is often just with your eyes. You're looking for things like cracks and things like that. So I think a comprehensive visual inspection is probably the best thing you can be doing. And so you should really be doing it at least annually. So the frequency of inspection and monitoring activities should take into account regulatory requirements, consequences of dam failure, and past conditions, time of development of expected failure modes, weather. So there's all these things we should be thinking about and sort of have in our mind as context when we go out to do surveillance or inspection. Although we're focusing on inspection, it does apply to everything. So these are all CDA kind of guidance things. So, and here's the goal of surveillance and inspection, is to identify deviations in performance conditions. So we can do corrective measures, right? So corrective or risk mitigation measures can be implemented. So that is the goal here. We're not talking about techniques, but we are talking about the importance of surveillance and inspection. So lots of stuff about dam safety management system. There's many things in there, right? We've got reporting, we've got third-party dam safety reviews, we've got operation, maintenance, surveillance, emergency preparedness. We've got all kinds of things, right? And so we've just highlighted surveillance. Surveillance is just one piece of that puzzle. And surveillance and inspection might be the most important part of your policy. So that's something we just really got to be doing. So we're going to be doing one today. Again, this is just another slide to show you sort of the overarching. Our dam safety management system includes many things, many things. But routine maintenance is right there at the top. It often is one of those links that keep everything together and working. And there's principles in the Canadian Dam Association and good reasons as to why we should be doing these things. So I'm going to keep moving to stay on time. So dam safety regulation, going back to that, we have that table of activities based on your consequence, which we reviewed last week. You can see the frequency that we need to be doing things. So oftentimes weekly, quarterly, and so forth. We see them in here for conduct site surveillance, sorry, and here's oftentimes it's annually for inspection. So just letting people in. Okay, and so we'll see some other things too, that while we're doing an inspection, we can do them at the same time. We can double check and review our consequence. We'll be conducting site surveillance. It certainly overlaps. And some other things too. We can test our gates, we can test the operation of things, we can collect readings from our instrumentation. So these are all things that we're going to knock off 5 things of maybe the 9 we have to do, right? When we go out there. So that's dam safety regulations. Didn't spend a lot of time on it, but we just wanted to run through that and give everyone an idea of where all this is coming from. And again, I recommend you go back to our other online webinars. They are linked all off the BC Dam Safety website, and you can learn more about all the other things you need to do in your dam safety to maintain your dam safety management system, to make sure it's robust. So dam safety resources. here we go. We've got, you can just jump right on the website, just Google BC Dam Safety. Your first hit will probably be the site. If you use the keyword resources or technical resources or something like that, you will find this page. And under each category, you can just pull off this stuff. So right here, we have the maintenance of dams manual. That is what we've covered in the past. It really covers the techniques, what things look like, you know, what's a longitudinal or a transverse crack in a dam and what might that mean. So these are all things you definitely want to be checking out. And you can print this thing in a binder and just take it out with you. So, but there's also this pocket book, which is a nice sort of leaner version of that big manual that have those illustrations that you can look at. Actually, I've got one kicked around here somewhere. I thought it was an arm's reach, but we'll see an image of it here in 1 second. Yeah, so those are the books there. I actually happen to have the FEMA one, which this was, you know, made after. But this is what they look like. This is the pocketbook. You can download it. If you're ever at one of the BC or our dam safety booths, you can pick up one for free. And then there's this manual as well. Jump on the website. Lots of really good stuff on there. So, okay. So the dam, what is this? My apologies. I just need to clear this. There, I had a note from this morning somehow pop back up. Okay, there we go. So training workshops and webinars. Talked about this lots already, probably said it 3 or 4 times, but if you go on there, there's also the education and training link. And there's the past, those 3 ones I would highlight specifically as ones you want to check out before going out and doing your own inspections. So the dam inspection of vegetation, animal management techniques, that's a pretty good one. Lots of common problems people have that we address. Surveillance and inspection is the main one from 2021. That covers really the content of that manual and that little guide booklet. And dam performance monitoring, instrumentation, data analysis. We dive quite a bit deeper into what are we looking for when we're collecting data from V-notch weirs, from piezometers, things like that. And how do we analyze them? So those are some of the things that are in that list of activities we should be doing as part of the regulated activities. So those things, we show you how to do that and what that looks like. So check those out. Those will help you in doing what we're going to be doing today. So off that same link, you can download these templates. So it says it is recommended that you customize this form for your dam. So all of your dams will be a little different. This one happens to be for concrete dams. So if you don't have a concrete dam, or maybe you have a part of your dam is concrete, you may want to use part of that form. And again, these are pretty simple forms. Like as you can see, you know, seepage, you know, I'm looking at this one here, seepage, concrete structure, yes, no, like it's kind of a one pager. There's not a lot to it. This is meant to be done, I wouldn't say on the fly, but with not that much time spent. You're kind of walking the dam. You're maybe looking at it from the crest and from the toe. You're not doing a very thorough walk around, but you are, you know, collecting instrumentation. You're taking photographs. You're filling out a record and making sure as kind of a high level check that everything looks good in the field. And you can verify things like you know, if you have instrumentation that you can read when you're not on site, those things you're verifying the field. So again, this one's for earth fill, rock fill type dams. Again, you might want to customize that. You might want to add a section on the bottom that has, you know, all the different instruments you have, and so you're not forgetting to fill out, you know, collect piezometer 1, 2, and 3, like what those pieces of information are, so you can analyze them later. And this is what we're focusing on today. So you can download that template. That's a formal annual inspection template. I think they have it in Excel, and I think they have it in Word. Again, you want to customize it, add some things to it. We give you some recommended customizations just to make sure you knock off some other things like your redeterminant of your consequence, because we do need to record that annually. So anyways, I'm going to keep going here. We're going to get into the virtual inspection soon, which is quite a bit more interesting than the regulations and the templates. But anyway, when we want to be ready and we want our field inspection to go smoothly. So one of the things we recommend is if you don't have a concrete dam and you have an earth dam, which is, I would say, most of the dams here in BC, you're going to want to blow this page away. Little things like that really simplifies your walkthrough. And there's other subsections of things, like if you're doing inspecting your spillway, and there's lots of different things in there in the spillway template. So if you don't have, a big concrete conveyance section, you might want to just blow some certain sections out to really simplify it for your dam. Because again, if it's not simple, you're probably not going to be doing it. So you want it to be useful. You want it to be something that's easier to look at when you go back to it. So another recommendation we have is, because we have to redetermine our classification every year, oftentimes the one time we're on site and doing a thorough inspection per year is our formal inspection. So I recommend adding something like this, maybe in here or something like that, somewhere in your template, and we'll show you that in our example. So basically, you just go through and do your check. You have maybe 2-3 questions. Is there a record of the dam classification determination or whatever on file, and is it supported? Yes, right? And then you can follow that up by saying it's still appropriate, and putting some notes on your formal annual inspection. And that way you do have a record of your annual review of classification. And so again, we spent a lot of time on that last week, but this is a really great way to simplify that process. Once you have a determination and have some clear rationale on file, this is a great way to show that you have checked it at least once in any particular year, and it's easy to find. So next slide. So inspection review. So we said we're not going to cover techniques, but we do want to do very quick review of some things before we just dive right into a virtual inspection. So here are some of the things we look for, or not look for, but these are some of the main components of a dam. So we've got the crest. So when we're talking about the crest, we're talking about anything sort of in here, right? So, we're looking for irregularities like, differential settlement maybe could tell us something about, maybe we're losing material from internal erosion, or maybe, we're having excessive settlement where our foundation's failing, and it could be causing cracking depending on the type of material we have. So there's a lot of things we can look for when we look just visually at our dam. We can stand here with our legs, and arms and body kind of below it. We eyeball that crest. We can see, is this level? So these are all things we can do quite easily. But that's, when we do our formal inspection too, we go one by one. We kind of go through all the pieces so we don't miss anything. And then it reminds us to think about those things when we're on site. So upstream slope. One thing you'll notice in this image, the upstream slope is covered. So we like to see the whole upstream. We like to see the trash racks, especially if they're way down here. These are all things we want to take a look at. Sometimes when we time or formulate inspections, we might do that in the springtime during freshet to see how the spillway flows and so forth. But then we might not see the upstream slope or the condition of the upstream trash rack, at least from the upstream side. And so these are things we want to think about. Maybe don't do your inspection always at the deadline in October, because you're only going to see it, in a certain condition. So you're going to want to kind of change it up from year to year, and as to when you do it. Again, when you're looking at things like the downstream slope, and we're especially looking in the groin areas, and we're looking in the toe, obviously we're going to have a lot more seepage in those areas when we're at full pool. So again, when we're trying to get an understanding of normal conditions for a dam, where it seeps, how much water comes out of our drains, piezometer levels, we get information for how your dam performs at all levels, in all conditions. And so in the same way, when we do our formal annual inspection, we want to see it at those different times. So, okay, auxiliary spillway, I mean, I would just call this the main spillway. Sometimes you have a secondary or emergency. These are things we want to look at. Typically, this is the approach. Sometimes in the inspection form breaks it up into sections. We've got the approach section. We've got a control section. Maybe you've got some sort of like concrete structure in here, or weir, or maybe you have something even radial gates, or who knows. You could have something with training walls or some sort of approach channel. There's a lot of things you could have here, and this is kind of a simple spillway, but this would be called the conveyance section, I guess. So this may often be quite different in terms of how it's designed, where everything up here could be concrete, and you'll see that in our example. This could be a concrete deck, could be riprap or something like that. And then this is our kind of terminal or terminus. And same here, but for the low-level outlet, and we'll see that in the LLO section, the low-level outlet section of our template. But here for the spillway, this is sort of where it terminates. Oftentimes where it terminates could be, we have spillways that sort of come down like this. And if they're terminating close to the toe of our dam, we really want to be cognizant of those terminal sections, because as they fail, they're much more, they cause a lot more potential hazards to the dam as it eats away and erodes our embankment. Whereas here, if it starts to fail, it's not as critical. So anyway, just a quick background of some of the sort of areas and zones and typical features of a dam that we're going to be covering, and it's certainly similar to the one we're going to be reviewing. So this is more on the techniques and the things and the modes of failure. Lots of different modes of failure. Oftentimes they're connected. You could have, this looks like a longitudinal crack where it goes along longitudinally. That might happen from, it could be multiple different things. You could have, slumping going down this way. You see some slumping here. Transverse cracking. That could be from, foundation, settlement. There's lots of different things that just a visual look can tell us about what's going on with the dam. And so the main thing when we're doing a formal inspection is we need to be very thorough. Something small like this, could be a real problem, and it might not be even leaking, especially if our water level is down here, right? This is sort of our level right in here. This might not be leaking at the time that we're on site, and there might be a big burrow coming up through here. And unless you walk right over that, doing some sort of pattern, zigzag pattern on here, you are not going to find that. So we need to be very thorough on our formal inspections. Okay, just making sure no one's there. I don't see any questions yet, but we will have certainly periods for interaction. Quick snapshot. This is some stuff that we will be, or that we cover in the other webinars. So we talk about all these different types of modes of failure, things that can go wrong. And these are the things we're looking for, right? And they happen over a long period of time. Like this one's shows vegetation. We see debris accumulation. This might be debris accumulation, or all these burrows, excess vegetation. Lots of things, the erosion on the upstream slope. These things happen very slowly over time, and so unless we if we're only looking at the last little bit or the last inspection, it can kind of normalize over time. And so we want to be thinking about what should our dam look like, making notes, identifying problems, and following up. So again, the goal for a formal inspection is to just identify the problems and then provide an outline recommendation so that we can follow up. So here we go. This is again going back to my last point. We want to be thorough. So this really applies to both the upstream and the downstream slope. And we're going to go through quite a few photos in our virtual inspection, but some of them are kind of give a pattern like that. We don't have a lot of photos, but typically this is what you're going to want to do, right? I find on a really long dam, sometimes doing something like this, because that pattern makes more sense. Because once you finally get to the other side, you can go do the upstream and then Z pattern that. Whereas if you have a really tall dam, you know, something like this, going back and forth makes a lot more sense. You certainly won't get nearly as tired for those big ones. So some recommendations there for you. But the idea is that a rule of thumb is if you were to take, you know, a dozen golf balls and chip them all out onto the upstream and downstream slope of your dam, you should be able to find, I think, almost all of them. Unless they, you know, really get tucked behind some grass or something like that. So that's the level of sort of rule of thumb of the how specific and, you know, how thorough you want to be when you're doing these formal inspections. Remember, I'm living here in Lake Country. Others in the Okanagan or wherever you might be living, there are a lot of dams up above us, and the concept to think that someone might not really be looking at, let's say, a square meter or many square meters of these dams ever for the whole year except for one time. And they have a lot of risk associated with these dams, some of these dams, a lot more than others. And we need to be taking our time when we're up there to be looking at these things. So I really want to stress that on the upstream and downstream slopes, it takes time to do a formal land inspection. You can't get out there like a surveillance and be like, okay, we're just going to do, you know, we're going to get this done in 45 minutes. You want to spend some time. You want to spend hours out there. And I think you spend even more time desktop before you go out so that so those hours are extremely effective compared to hours that maybe are surveillance. You're just collecting information. You want to understand what's going on, how your dam is performing, and where to look before you go out there so that the hours you spend out there is very focused and you are identifying things that are a problem. Okay, inspection prep. So that's what I started talking about. So inspection preparation. This is from the CDA, so they have slightly different terminology. But so formal inspections are typically performed annually or semi-annually. We saw that on our regulated table, right? It's even in our regulation here in BC. They include a detailed visual examination of the dam and the instrumentation used to monitor the dam performance. This inspection should document observations regarding the condition of the dam with any significant condition changes from previous inspections being highlighted. See, so how would we know that unless we do some preparation or some review, right? You can't do it if you don't have some knowledge about past conditions. So some assessment of the severity of observation or of observed anomalies, as well as recommendations for maintenance, repair, inspection, and further monitoring should be completed. So we need to be able to, at least supported by visual information and background information, be able to assess it, right? We assess the severity. So we're going to be doing that a little bit today. And so what does all this include? What does this include? Well, it includes visual examination, we already mentioned, can be much more useful than even these very complex, you know, technical seismic, you know, checks and things that we do. Visual is sometimes the most useful. So includes visual, includes assessment of observed anomalies. So we're going to be looking at seepage and sort of anecdotally, you know, supported by judgment, right? And that's not necessarily engineering judgment, right? We're not, it's from your understanding of the performance of the dam, how it should perform. So knowing modes of failure, what it's made of, all these types of things is really valuable for you as a dam owner to understand how your dam might fail, because it gives you better support on how to assess whether or not this is, you know, hazardous or whether this is normal seepage, for example. Recommendations for maintenance, repair, and follow-up. An easy one is if you observe and go, well, there's tons of vegetation on it. That online webinar, that give us, rules of thumb for vegetation said, keep it to a foot high and, less than the thickness of a thumb. Well, it's more than that. So you use that to provide recommendations to maintain the vegetation on your dam. So simple stuff. We just want to apply what we know to what we observe and then make follow-up plans. So that's the goal, is to identify the problems and then make notes for follow-up. And so doing those things is another thing that's really important. So what does this require? It requires dam safety training, 1, and 2, knowledge of past performance. So when we're preparing for an inspection, bring out that little booklet, bring out that printed manual, check out these webinars, and do whatever else you need to do. Hire an engineer to walk you through or something like that. You do need to do your work before you go out and do these things. So I want to invite everyone to use the chat. I'm just going to say hi here. Hi, everyone. Lots of you joined after. So you might not see where the chat is. So anyway, right there, you can see volunteer page. We've got a little chat. You can read the question there. What would you review prior to inspection? So I'm curious to see if anyone can answer correctly. I guess there's probably no wrong answer, but I'm interested to see what everyone has to share. So what would you review prior to inspection? So we saw in the last slide, here we got some great answers coming in now. We need to understand past performance. So someone said, Zeneca said previous inspections. Absolutely. People have already done this work before, right? It's kind of like copying your neighbor, right? Derek said last year's formal, last DSR, and audit. Right? These are all things that they probably have reviewed and looked at it. And we understand the condition then, right? It's always a snapshot in time. So even if that'll point our direction right to where there are already known issues. So someone said previous notes. These are all absolutely the types of things we want to look for. So let's see what else we got. So in DSRs, someone mentioned DSRs. Yeah, we can read about failure modes. We can read about all kinds of things that give us more context as to how our dam could fail and what we should look like. So someone said tools and materials. You're absolutely right. You're even getting ahead of me. But yeah, you might want to check out prior inspection, the list, right? What should I bring? And actually, that's a really important thing, because if you look at your drawings and you go, well, I've got 4 piezometers, I've got a V-notch weir, and I don't have a gauge, right, or like a reservoir measurement gauge, so I need to bring my builder level out, because that's how I measure my reservoir every time I'm out there from like maybe an elevation point. So knowing what's at the dam, what types of features your dam have, what type of instruments you have, then you know what equipment you need to bring, right? Tools is something we want to think about. So the proper time commitment to doing your inspection. I love that, Jennifer. So yeah, you want to look at that, get an understanding how much time it's going to take, and carve out the time, because this does take time. This takes resources. And whether you're in agriculture and have your farm I mean, there's always so many things to do, or whether you're in a city and you have to commit staff to it, this is a bit of work, especially if you've got lots of dams. So you do need to carve out the time. So anyway, here's a couple notes that I did. Remember, formal inspection includes these things: visual examination. So we want to know what we're going to visually, examine. So drawings, on-file information, familiar yourself with the dam and instrumentation. So just like someone said, that'll help you know what tools to bring too. Are you bringing chains or something to drag on a concrete spillway? Those are things we don't even discuss here, but if you have a big concrete deck spillway, you're going to want to think of maybe I'll just drag some chains and sound that thing, see if there's any voids underneath. So there's a lot of things that you wouldn't normally bring, but if you look at this, you might think of things that are going to be really useful. bring a drone, right? If it's huge, or you have some concerns in the reservoir. So assessment of observed anomalies is something else we do. So again, someone said past surveillance, inspection reports, um, right? How do we know it's normal unless we check what's normal? When I see this all the time, engineers go out there, it's not their dam. They might have a lot of engineering experience, but they don't have any experience or knowledge with the dam. So they look at the toe and they go, huh, well, there's some water here. Is this normal? And so, yeah, you would know that as the owner. So this is really important information to be knowledgeable about what conditions are normal. Is there a natural spring in the embankment down below, or things like that that you may not know, even if you just look at drawings? There's some local knowledge that comes with dams, right? So changes to downstream activity. Yes, that's a great one, Derek. We talked a little bit about consequence classification and how we added that to our template, and we'll see that. So if you know what your dam consequence is or have that record, might want to bring that with you, right? Because we're probably gonna make a record of our check. So great thinking ahead there. And lastly, pass recommendations and see if there's anything left outstanding. So there are some kind of boilerplate questions in the template that's like, have you reviewed the last DSR? Has everything in the DSR been followed up? So if you don't know what recommendations were made, um, you would have to look at that to know that. And then when you're out in the field, you can be like, oh, they did those things, right? Or maybe it's from a past inspection. So this is all really useful stuff because to a certain degree, it's doing our job for us, but it's also more importantly helping us say, that was a snapshot in time then. What does it look like now? We're looking for changes of conditions, right? Typically, your dam probably won't fail today unless there's change of condition. Sometimes it can be rapid, but we're looking for, can be minute, right? Changes of conditions over time. Remember how it said these failures can take years, but they could take minutes or hours. So we want to be cognizant of that. And it's all about the condition changes. So always, always, always review past inspections and surveillance. So always carve out, someone said carve out the time. So carve out the time to do a screening level assessment, or at least a screening level review of at least 1 year's of information. So DSRs are a thorough review of everything, at least 10 years, whereas annual inspections, you should at least look at the last year. And I like to review the last DSR. There's even questions on the template about the last DSR. So we get some context for the last 10 years. We know exactly what it looked like a year ago, but then we have a sense of how much it may be deviating over a longer period of time. And hopefully you have a lot of understanding about that dam and can review pictures from longer ago. So yeah, and we also need to, if we don't have experience or know the dam really well or understand the design or the typical performance, obviously this initial preparation, the time is going to go up, right? So if an engineer comes out and is maybe going to spend somewhere between 4 and 8 hours at your dam, they might have, I think they should have at least 4 or similar time, right? If they can do the inspection in 4 hours, they should have at least 4 hours of review time. That's a lot of time, but it's also very proportional to what you have on file. So some dams are much more complex, will have a lot more information, and so forth. So regardless, if you're inspecting your dam, you always want to be knowledgeable, and that amount of time is going to change. Charge your drone batteries. I couldn't say, well, that's a great comment, Dave. And charge everything else. I can't tell you how many times I've been out there with a water tank with a dead 9-volt square battery. So bring extra batteries, especially on your phones, power packs, whatever, chargers for your vehicle. So we're going to get into tools too. So great comments, everyone. And just a quick little review. I find this kind of useful, but simple. This is something they always bring up, certainly in the BC workshop that the province has put together. You want to be thinking about, how do I quantitatively measure things as well, right? You want to be able to locate them. You want to have numbers because we're looking at changes of condition, right? So if we can write down and measure flow rate, let's say in a V-notch weir, then we can tell, okay, it's changed over time, right? So we want to measure it, we want to photograph it, we want to locate it, we want to sketch and make notes about it. So this is simple, right? There's a question too we were talking about before, what tools to bring. So I'll open up to questions. Dave, you already answered. Some other people have already answered, but what are some things you would want to bring? And we're talking about tools here. Obviously, you want to be bringing things to wear. Like if you got to get in the water, bring waders, bring boots, bring warm clothes, but more the tools. Um, the tools you would bring. So, I mean, if we got to measure things, we're going to bring measurement things, but the drone was a really good one, and the batteries. Uh, what else do we have here? We had someone, um, kind of just saying, and materials. Um, you, I guess it really depends, right? If you do your preliminary review and you've got piezometers, right? You're gonna want not just a measuring tape, it often doesn't fit in the piezometer. You're gonna want a water tape, right? Um, Obviously, a measure tape. If you've got drains, seepage drains that you want to measure, you're going to want to be able to measure that. Maybe a stopwatch in a bucket. Someone says connectivity sensors for on-site piezometers. Yeah, so if you don't have a simple standpipe like a water tape, it could be vibrating wire or it could have some sort of logger on it, and you need some sort of either wireless or USB connection device. Make sure you update your software sometimes prior to going. If you have something more complex like that and you don't have Wi-Fi up there. Someone also said vehicle preparation is important too. Absolutely. I mean, I'll always do it safely, right? So bring sat phones or whatever if you need to, and do safety. But things like grades, other things we want to measure. So it's certainly not an all-inclusive list, but I can't tell you how many times just a simple socket set in my vehicle would have helped me get a borehole piezometer lid open. Same with something like this. If it's frozen, even if you don't need tools, tape measure. Phone is great. I mean, you can video, you can operate drones with it, you can take photographs, you can use it to calculate V-notch weirs. A bucket, I prefer clear, and then you can see if it's you can kind of visually look if there's any debris or turbidity in the water. These, I mean, on Amazon, you can get some of those cheap ones for $50. These are those distance range finders, but they give you grades and things like that. It's really useful if you're kind of making notes for distances. I highly recommend something like this. I mean, mine isn't even purchased. I just took a piece of 3/8 rod and welded it to a handle, and it's fabulous because you can feel material, you can push it in, you can sometimes lose the whole thing to soft soils, but you can tap on concrete, you can open lids with it. It's quite a valuable tool, so I highly recommend something like a geoprobe. Um, so yeah, camera, bucket, stopwatch, probe, water tape, screwdriver, tools, drone. Yeah, oftentimes, if you have special cameras or anything that you need to look inside of a vault or whatever, uh, you might want things like Ziploc bags and stuff if you have some kind of sample of water or material, metal detector for someone just said, Nathan, for locating, like if you're going to collect survey and do like a monument survey, that's a little bit more maybe than a formal land inspection or something separate to it that supports it. But yeah, you might want to do that at the same time. You go out there, you got to find all these things, right? You got to measure them and so forth. So great answers there. So we have about 40 minutes left, should be just the right amount of time. Got a lot of slides to go through here today. And again, this is meant to be, uh, I want as much engagement as possible. That should actually say just exercise because there were two examples, but we don't have time for a second. So apologies. But Yes, if everyone can use your chat as we start to look at the questions, we are going to want, oh, just let some people in here. Hi, Tara. Um, yeah, we want to be doing this and hopefully it engages a thought process. When we go through a virtual inspection, I do want pauses where force you to think, go, okay, what am I looking at? What should I be looking for? And what does that whole process look like? Okay, so let's say we just got tasked with inspecting a dam. What does that look like? So here we go. We want to start with some background information, right? So let's see, is everyone on? Okay, yeah, everyone's in. So I want to make a disclaimer here. Obviously, this comes from some real information, an actual dam, right? Because there's photos of it. But really, I made up a lot of stuff. So some stuff was taken from other stuff. And it's really been an example that's especially all the background information, even things like scales and stuff like that, are all totally made up. So the actual information supporting this particular site, which is going to remain anonymous, is hypothetical. A lot of the background information. So I do want to make that disclaimer here. But here's the hypothetical example. So here's the example dam. We've got a dam located here. We've got a scale of about 1 kilometer. So if you can kind of gauge that, right? It's even walking from here to here along this, looks like an access road, or maybe this road here. It's pretty big. It's a pretty decent sized reservoir. Um, it's pretty rural. If anyone's got questions, we can kind of, work through them. But this is just a quick picture of where the dam is and the reservoir. So, we've got some shallow areas in here. We're just trying to kind of get a sense of the site. So, next question, next slide. There's a picture of the dam, right? So we're looking at something kind of like this. We're zoomed in, and so we're gonna be reusing this little screenshot to show where a photo is as we go through this. So, as you, the inspector, arrive, when you arrive from this side or this side, and walk around and maybe do your Z pattern and stuff like this, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put this image up here on the left, and then I'm going to have a little arrow, for example. If it's something like that, you'd be standing here, and you're looking this way, and that's what the photo on that slide is going to look like. So we're going to do a walkthrough inspection of what this hypothetical dam, what we might want to write down, things like that, as we go through an inspection. So we're going to go through some, background sort of information to try to get a sense of this hypothetical, inspection situation. So just here are my notations. Okay, just making sure everyone's in. All right, so remember, what do, right? We always, always, always start with a screening level review. So I'm just going to take a second. So we review past inspections, past surveillance, maybe past audits, all those other things we talked about. So these are kind of the main things: past inspections and review, and everything else we can find at least 1 year back, right? And I would say if you're not the owner, you obviously want to go much further back because you don't have that knowledge, even if it's not fresh. You really need to probably spend more time. So familiar yourself with the dam too, right? Even if you know the dam or think you know the dam really well, double check the drawings. Maybe print a couple copies, shrunken down to an 8.5 by 11, so you can bring them out and you can sketch on them. You can locate issues. And just remind yourself what it is you've got. So, yeah, and do engage. Everyone's got, if anyone through this example has questions or they have suggestions like, hey, do this or that as well, do jump in. So we're going to start doing sort of background investigation. Here's some information. Let's say the dam was built in the 80s. It has a catchment of say 300 to 400 kilometers squared. So, I mean, if you know the dam and it's your dam, obviously you're going to have a sense of how big that is. But if you don't know anything, and all of us, none of us know anything, we got to think about that. Okay, a dam that has 2 square kilometers, it gets a little bit of flow. Well, the bigger it is, the more flow it gets, right? So we're starting to get a feel for what it is. How big is this thing? Okay, is it maybe 9, 10 meters by 100 meters? I can kind of gauge that. If it's in feet, call it 300 feet long, maybe 25 to 30 feet high, right? We've got some slopes here, how steep it is. We've got dam design information. We've got some provincial record. Okay, we've got provincial record drawings. Okay, so we've got some drawings. We've got some instrumentation sketches, right? So we know we have instrumentation on the dam. We've got some, let's say it's been fixed up at one point, so some work was done on it. Maybe shortly after it was built. What else we got? We've got past performance. We've got, a recent formal inspection, let's say. And we've got, what else do we got? We've got a DSR from 2013. What else have we got? We've got an audit. Most of our dams get audited once every couple of years, right? They say every 5 years. So we've got one within the last 5 years. So me as an inspector, if I didn't know anything about this dam, this is some low-hanging fruit, right? Or if you're the owner, you go, yeah, what should I be looking for? You pull out all this old stuff and you go, well, audit's probably got some notes. The DSR probably has a couple notes. Jump to the summary table, right? We're doing a screening level review here. Recent formal inspection available. Heck, they might have even used our template, right? This might be really easy to help us out. What else we got? We've got, let's check out the drawings, right? So, okay, on we go. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to point out. No, I'd say that's about it. So this is kind of that same reservoir and image we looked at, right? It gives us an idea. Okay, we've got concrete. We got some concrete there, so we might want to be thinking about different tools to bring. We've got maybe some, monuments that we want to measure. Someone mentioned survey, but if, someone else is doing that once a year, quarterly, or however often you do it, maybe it's only every 5 to 10 years, or post seismic event or something like that. So we might not need that. Anyway, we want to start thinking about this critically. Now we got north going this way. What else have we got? Anyway, we know how to get there, hopefully. Someone was talking about being prepared. Some sort of benchmark for a water, water survey, perhaps. So anyway, some tips as to maybe where we, could find some background information and so forth. Anyway, that's our site. So now what is this, we're looking at this dam a little bit more now. So before we inspect it, okay, so to start, this would be a great page to print. Even if you sort of crop it like that, print that 8.5 by 11, you can mark it up, right? So if you're down here and you're like, oh, I see seepage here. There, I can just mark it here and be like, C note, right? C note on my formal annual inspection, checklist, right at the end. And then I can attach this and reference all those locations. Remember that simple acronym we were using. We want to be able to locate things, and so that next time we come out here, or maybe someone else that we delegate this inspection to, they know what's going on here, right? So basically we've got the reservoir here, it flows out that way, so that's a spillway channel, and we've got a low level outlet, and we've got, what else do we have? Well, there's not too much shown here. We've got some riprap. It's kind of showing us riprap on the spillway. So if we don't know the dam well yet, we're starting to get a sense of what this thing looks like. It's riprap, in through here too. This is pretty sloped all through here. This is all pretty sloped. So if you're not, some people can look at these and have a much better sense of it in 3D space. But this is the crest, right? And these sort of little ticks, however they illustrated this, this is the downstream slope. This is the upstream slope, and at the time of, our investigation, let's say it's at a time when there's, quite a bit of water in here. So we're not going to see this. We might at a future time, if we were doing some sort of more thorough follow-up, we might want to get, underwater camera or just investigate it when the reservoir is down here somewhere. Low level outlet goes through here. We don't have any details on this drawing, but we actually have a little, walking thing to a vertical chamber. I think the vertical chamber is right in here somewhere. So hopefully that gives us a sense, but before we go out, we know a bit about this dam now. Okay, what else do we got? Okay, it said there were some instrumentation, sketches or notes. So at some time, a borehole was put in, and this might have been a test pit or a borehole as well. It shows, you say water level up here, got a water level here. I don't know where it goes. We might have some notes where it's seepage in the past. So we get a sense of sort of how this dam works. We've got a glacial till for some of it. It's very generic in terms of the detail it's giving us here on this particular sketch. But what I'm saying is it gives us a little bit of background about the information. One thing we know is we have a borehole and we have some sort of instrumentation here that we could measure. So we're going to want to bring probably a water tape. We might want to bring tools to open this thing up. We might have details as to how to open that, or maybe it doesn't need tools, but these are the things we want to think about or remind ourselves of before we go out there. If we have the dam safety review on file, it might tell us a little bit about potential, internal erosion, things we might want to be aware of. It gives us a sense of some things we might want to know about before we go to the field. So what else do we have? Okay, so the DSR does tell us some things. Well, it tells us it's high. So we do have an assessment on file. So someone said, bring your assessment. Well, if you know what it is, that's great. You have something on file that provides rationale for consequence of, let's say, high. For this example, so hazard failure modes. Let's see, adequacy of spillway is unknown. So there could be questions around the spillway, right? So what else do we have? Dam is susceptible by, seismic slumping, internal erosion. I mean, these are pretty typical. Everything is potentially susceptible to these things. I mean, any embankment dam, we want to be looking at those, but we might have some, reduced factors of safety or something. So we want to think about that. So low level outlet is aging. So, okay, I mean, it was built in the 80s, so what does that make? 40 some years, 45, maybe it's older. But some things we want to think about. So here's the recommendations. That's maybe what we're more of. So conduct a hydrological assessment. I'm not sure if that's done yet. Probably some fixing up or rehab on the spillway. Okay, and increased factor of safety. So there's some things there, right? It wasn't too steep, or we're not sure. It said about seismic. So one of the loading conditions, but anyway, we don't need to know a lot about the details, but what, our job is to go do a formal inspection, and here's some background information that gives us some context about things we want to look at. Let's look at, if it could be potential, only under seismic though. To my knowledge, maybe no seismic event has happened out there. Probably no slumping or cracking or anything from a seismic event, but it might be a little steeper. So we're going to want to look at embankment stuff. And there's lots of background types of things we want to look for. And we also want to check out that spillway, right? So nothing really else stands out to me for this. I'm going to have to keep moving here, but some excessive vegetation. This was the audit, a recent audit. A little bit of sloughing, some disrepair on the spillway. So the spillway's come up a second time. Past instrumentation. We've got some data on there, but it hasn't been around that long, right? No obvious anomalies. Everything's looking kind of good there. And recent formal inspection, there was one on file, very similar to what was on the DSR. So really nothing has really happened much in the last, 10 years, and there's some kind of recommendations there. So some anecdotal information, there's been recent wildfire. What else? Operators said they've never seen more than sort of a foot in the spillway. So it kind of gives us a sense of, what flows through the spillway. We've got, I mean, this is pretty typical. Some thoughts of maybe get more water. Okay, the standpipe was installed, sometime recently, so, some things have happened in the past, some new gates. So there's some, new stuff, stuff's getting repaired. Um, so now we're going to jump into the inspection. So we've essentially gone through all those past things, and it takes time to pull out those things. And it still took us like, oh, good 5 minutes just to review the summary bullets. So you got to find these documents, you got to pull them all out. Now it gives us some information. So we're going to pull off a template. It's slightly different format from the Excel document that we can customize. And so we're going to try to fill everything out ourselves. And like I said, you can always hire someone to help you do it the first time, because there are a lot of questions in there that we might have a hard time filling out. And it's okay to write unknown or not applicable or whatever. Or if you're customizing this table, you could delete it, right? But the more information we have, the better. So this is what the form looks like. So we start out, we try to get all that information we can from our past things. So I'm really not going to go in this much, but we measure a couple things when we're out there. We put a date in there. Let's assume this inspection happens about 2 years ago. Again, this is all made up. John Smith. Um, we've got a past DSR. We have some notes of the DSR. We're really just summarizing what we just went through, right? So we've done that. What else have we got? Yeah, we've got the summary of some of the information. We did have some invasive investigation. Are the dam materials known? These are starting to get hard questions, some of these. If you don't know what to look for, you could just write unknown here. But, some stability deficiencies identified, and we were thinking seismic is what was the one. Are dam construction details available? So yes, some details. We had the drawing, and we had some information, construction date, and current consequence, right? So this is all stuff we just learned. So it's not that exciting yet. We're not at site yet, right? But all stuff we got to do, right? Next sort of section of this template, redetermine dam classification. We added this, okay? We custom edition, we changed our file. We said, is there sorry, I got something covering up my screen. I can't quite read. Is there a record of the dam classification information on file? So yes, right, the DSR. So we said based on local knowledge, nothing changed. Upstream and downstream environment. Is the dam classification appropriate? Yes, we're done, right? And if for some reason this had a no here, we told you last week how you can come up with your own, and you might not necessarily need a complex dam break assessment. You might be able to do this yourself. The dam looked like it was pretty rural, so maybe we can do this ourselves, and then this can be yes next time, and then we meet all our requirements under the regulation there. So that would be sweet. So anyway, just wanted to show you this quick customization, because that checks a pretty big box off our to-do list, the number one on our to-do list. So what else do we got here? We've got drainage area. So, let's say we didn't know what the 330 was. We could have used something like the BC website has a water tool. Just Google BC water tool. You can, for a lot of our regions, you can just click on a map, and it'll add up your watershed catchment. So even if you don't have that information, that's really useful. Sometimes it asks these, you might not know what the 1,000-year flood is, or the inflow design flood. Some of these are start to become sort of dam terminology, no pun intended. But it's if you're not sure what these are, um, you could always have a consultant fill them out. But in this case, we didn't have any information on file. We had some preliminary information from 1990 when they did some rehab work. Remember, you said in the 90s. They did some work, so they had a 1 in 100 flow from back then. So if you're familiar with CFS, anyway, just some background info that we're filling out here, and giving us context. So let's keep going. Okay, we just put some spillway stuff in here. Real simple stuff, right? You're out there already measuring. Some of these you would have to physically measure if you don't have them on drawings. We didn't know what a probable maximum flood was, but there is a little calculator that, as long as you know area, and we knew what it was in the previous slide, 330, you can just punch it in. It's like a little tiny formula, and it's super coarse. I mean, it is useful because it gives us like a magnitude of the type of flood we might have to design for. And it also be mindful, probable maximum flood, you only use that on an extreme consequence dam. You would not use that on something like a high consequence dam. So it would be way bigger than what we would design for, but we're going to be, pretty big spillway size. So what else we got? Okay, so we finished all the background stuff. We filled out all the background information. We already did the review of all the background information. Now we get to do sort of the more fun thing. And just think about that. We've spent most of our time on this webinar just flying up to this point, and I actually got to start keeping moving. So focus on where you think the main issues might be, and this is the thing you wanted to print. So, okay, next slide. So this is what we want to fill out. So we're walking around. We're starting with the upstream slope, and it's broken up in sections. So please, everyone, we got to move through this pretty quickly. So if everyone can just jump in with the chat, and I'm going to be moving through these probably about 10 seconds a slide. So everyone look through here real quick. Do you see we're standing up here on the dam? We're looking this way. And does anyone see anything that's a problem? Start making notes, and everyone, as I move through 10 seconds of the slide, just start firing things in there, and then we're going to see what kind of stuff. We're seeing vegetation. Someone said debris. If you remember drawings, that's kind of where our spillway is. We see a bit of a log boom here. Actually, it's probably more of maybe it was connected up to here at some point, was broken, but it's kind of in front of the intake. Looks like erosion on the spillway. Someone said, okay, let's keep going here. Everyone monitor the chat too, right? I won't be able to say everything in a second. Everyone just start firing things in there. Right, now we're looking back here. We're looking toward this this upstream, sort of intake gate. We've got a walking bridge or gangway, mechanical valve up there. Remember, we're still focusing on upstream slope. So what all do we got here? Okay, now we're standing on that thing, and we're looking at, we always want to have our orientation looking downstream, left and right, right? I'm starting to run a little bit behind on time here. So lack of riprap. Yeah, we see a little bit of beaching. We see some riprap around the structure. We got a broken fence. That might not be a dam safety thing, but if you're in cattle ranching, then that's definitely important. But we want to keep them off the dam too, wherever possible. We see access, LLO, an emergency event possible. Yeah, someone's already thinking about access, right? Is access to the low-level outlet, sort of blocked from the spillway? So all good things. My arrow's a little, actually, that's right. You're standing on that thing looking toward now the left side of the slope. So we see some riprap. Someone mentioned debris. So now we're walking further to the left side of the dam. Someone mentioned sloughing. If I were to go back on the last slide, yeah, maybe a little bit of sloughing, a little bit of, even just walking erosion, maybe from cattle that got in there. Probably just walking. So we've got, someone said debris, or sorry, So it says, do the concrete lock blocks have a purpose? They could be for the linkages of the log boom. So we'll get to the log boom soon, but I don't see the log boom connected to there. So we're probably found something for the spillway section. It's a pretty big tree. Yep, good point. 1, 2, 3. We got a big tree right in our embankment, roots and vegetation. We've got lots of guidance on that. Probably not a good place to have one. So we've got a couple things already: beaching, vegetation, um, some debris, and that's kind of more spillway debris, right? There's some linkages of our log boom. Anyway, I'm gonna keep moving here. Yeah, so as we get a little up close, does anyone see anything that looks a little gnarly, right? We've got erosion burrow, that's big enough for um, that's big enough for something. Maybe a muskrat, but it could be a beaver. Staff gauge bent over. That's actually my builder's rod. I like it because sometimes it helps me walk around like a staff, but it's actually very useful for measuring things. So most of you already answered everything here. And again, I want to keep encouraging everyone to use this chat. And what do we got, right? Here's the form. So I've kind of pre-filled out some of this stuff. Slope protection. The riprap has been pretty displaced, and we see quite a bit of wave action. We had a pretty big reservoir, and we got a lot of wave action. So I think we kind of have to check off one of these things, right? And I think it's appropriate to say repair because we have a pretty big burrow in there. We've got obviously probably haven't had a major wind like 1,000-year event before, and we are seeing quite a bit of erosion. So we see some other sort of maintenance items here, and essentially this is all I don't want to go over every detail. We're not going to make the time, but we want to be able to go through this, and I like highlighting each box because it helps us look at it again later, because we're going to look at this one again next year, and this helps us pull out those recommendations. So, oops. So now we're going on to the crest. So, we're kind of looking over the spillway right now. This is the crest we kind of filled out on the drawing. That's what it looks like here. It's nice, thick, established grass that helps the erosion, but sometimes it makes it hard to see. Everyone keep talking. Someone said maybe slumping. Yeah, and this could have been, mechanical equipment access too, right? This could be a little bit of erosion or slumping, but the drawing showed riprap, I think. So, it could just be sort of the vegetation growing through the rock riprap. But yeah, again, right, we've got a little bit of vegetation there. So everyone keep kind of chiming in. So one thing I noted here is, we're kind of looking right here. We should be able to find a golf ball. So we found a little elevation monument. So, and there ends up being quite a few of these things. Tree growth on the downstream slope, absolutely. So one thing we noted too is we found that thing, right? It's the borehole. So that's our one kind of standpipe piezometer. So while we're up there, it's hard to find golf balls on this one, but you should definitely be able to find that, and hopefully any survey monuments. So, we pull our water tape out. Let's say we get 7 meters, right? Let's say, it didn't appear to be, any different than our expectations. There's just another photo. We're looking downstream. That's that same monument. Again, think in your head, what might be there, right? We've got, it's looking relatively flat. We're kind of looking on the downstream. You can see that fence that someone said kind of might be broken or just doesn't quite make it to the reservoir. Okay, so this is more standing little on the downstream slope. You're trying to catch an eyeball along the top length. See how hard it is? Someone said, vegetation, right? Vegetation really obscures your inspection. That big rock is almost completely hidden. You should be able to see that and not trip over it if you're looking thorough enough, but it just goes to show you, if you can miss a big rock like that, you're probably missing other things too. So vegetation is definitely something we see. We're kind of over on the right side, no contact information signage. That's a good point. That is absolutely something we're going to want to look at. On each side of the dam, if you can access both sides, usually there's a sign. So great comment, Dan. That is one of the real sneaky ones that will end up on this one. So what are some of the things you saw? I think everyone got everything, right? Is the sign marked? I didn't think anyone would get that. No, right? So we want a sign on anything that's on crown. I recommend anything, even if it's not on crown, because if a neighbor sees it or something like that, they can rip the phone number, and hopefully save your dam. So maybe a little bit of runoff erosion, just that was noted. Really minor stuff. Where's my slide change here? Maybe settlement. We don't see any, but better monitor it. It's hard to see through that vegetation, right? So once you vegetate it, maybe we'll look at it a little closer. So downstream, I'm really gonna have to fly here, everybody. There's a photo of it might go just a few minutes long, so I apologize if some of you have to pop off. Um, but I really want to make sure that the recording has everything available and that we're not rushing sort of the core content. So we see a bit of a bench in here. There's some things we might see. Again, someone said vegetation. Yeah, it's not too bad, but it's more than a foot, right? It doesn't meet that lump or that rule of thumb that we talk about in our rodent and vegetation, management techniques, right? So anyway, that's kind of where it is now. This is the same photo as before, but now we're kind of thinking about the downstream, right? We're kind of steep, I think. Yeah, bottom of downstream so looks steeper than the rest. Really great point, Billy. That is something that we're gonna catch, right? So everyone is, you know what, you're filling this thing out for me. Um, you know, you so now we're kind of we call this the groin, where the embankment, sort of connects to the existing ground. That's always an area where we might have contact erosion or other things. We saw in that borehole and maybe in the dam safety review failure modes. There could be seepage or, there's always potential seepage issues with homogeneous dams. So we really want to be thorough here. We're walking around looking for wet places. I know we can't feel, moisture, but we might be able to see more aquatic vegetation, right? So, kind of keep an eye out for things like that. There's the low level outlet, which is something else we're going to cover in a different section here in a second. But there you see that, you know, it kind of goes like this. There was a bit of a bench and then it kind of looks steeper, right? Did we have maybe some slumping? I don't know, right? It's hard to tell with this vegetation, but some great comments. Erosion around the outlet, absolutely. That's part of the downstream slope, downstream scour, all things we're kind of worried about, right? Someone said vegetation. This is kind of right in our groin. That's kind of right the area we're concerned about. We like to see 6 meters, right? The length of a pickup, maybe like 25 feet, 20 feet. We'd like to be clear of everything, right? So there's some notes here we're going to want to take away, right? Is this kind of a darker, thicker vegetation, right? Vegetation is our friend because it often provides some monitoring value, right? So we see some of that. Again, some more photos, and you would want to be doing a parallel pattern probably on this one because it's pretty steep. Um, and then, it's a little more sure-footed if you're going horizontally. And, so we're just kind of taking, again here, this kind of looks a little more aquatic in here. And this is definitely sort of that aquatic grasses, right? And we can see it extends and it probably extends out something like that, right? So these are things that are probably typical from past inspections. Turbidity, someone's like, is there turbidity? There might be, right? That kind of flow, we probably wouldn't be able to measure it, but we want to look for that. Those are the things we're looking for, right? Lots of good comments. I'm just going to keep going for the, see we're seeing some wet, squishy areas. So here I left a book for scale, and the next photo shows kind of an area that might be, might have a bit of point seepage here, right? So definitely something concerning that we want to, we definitely want to know that. So again, stuff that's hard to see. But these are the things we want to think about and writing down. And remember, we want to compare to past information. Can we sort of measure, is it saturated to here or is it saturated to here? Right? And maybe make some notes about measurements because it's still very close to full pool and be similar to full pool conditions. So again, we talked about a lot of those things already. So vegetation, we got to maintain, slope protection. We want to monitor bulges, could be, right? Some irregular slopes on the cop. Um, burrows, you know, we're not sure, right? Indications of high tailwater from the past, right? Because of aquatic vegetation. There's quite a few wet areas of spot seepage. Not spot, but like an area that seemed like it was getting more seepage than elsewhere. Maybe we could have a defect in the dam embankment. So things to think about. So I got to keep flying here. What was the last thing? This is two more little sections, and then we're going to go to conclusion. So, we're talking about the spillway, but we kind of have this spillway approach. I mean, someone's already said debris. We're getting close to the end here. The log boom's looking a little tired. So, that's something we want to know. And I think this probably went all the way across. Maybe it failed and kind of swung into here, or maybe it was protecting the trash racks. Again, those are in a dam specific investigation, you would probably know more information or can ask more information. But we definitely have some log boom issues, right? Because we got no log boom out here, we got a lot of logs in here. So yeah, one of the first things someone picked out, our approach channel is looking a little worn. What else we got? Erosion at the leading edge of concrete. Yeah, we kind of have, some missing concrete in there. Unfortunately, I don't have that many photos. Probably right inside there. Oh, here's a little bit better one. You can kind of see, it's maybe some scouring here. Again, that's sort of the abutment. We're not as concerned over there, but still, like this is going to be really impeding our potential flow. Lack of riprap, right? We saw those drawings. It showed like a nice gnarly thick, you know, patch of riprap all around if we remember our drawings, and we would have that attached. Riprap too small, right? Is it that's what someone mentioned, Billy. Is it big enough, right? Is there something on file, showing the size of riprap is appropriate? There's kind of our connections. I hate these things. I see them everywhere. Um, they often just pull off as soon as you're in a heavy wind or ice loading condition, high water. So you definitely want to make sure, it's one thing to have your cable spec'd appropriately, but you want to make sure those connect properly. So here's a photo of the actual spillway. We've got a little bit of spill happening. We've got a piece of, in there, some more debris. We've got quite a bit of degradation of concrete. Here's a little bit more of the riprap. You're probably right, it's probably too small. Yeah, we got degradation of concrete, some good comments. There's another photo, right? It's starting to look pretty tired, right? I want to keep moving pretty quick. Okay, so does anyone see anything here maybe? We've got kind of this concrete deck, and then we've got this drop off, right? Yeah, so Billy says drop off. We've got some, it's a pretty good drop off, right? This could have eroded over time and maybe washed away the beddings of this riprap, and now it's dropped down. So we're about coming up to 90 minutes here, and we're probably just going to go 10 minutes long. We're almost done, but apologies for running a little long. So here's under the drop off. We're seeing some kind of tucked in behind here of that last photo. We're seeing some areas where there could be, debris washing away. We have some, undercutting. Maybe we have to go back to those drawings and see what that, a profile of the original ditch might have been. I'm of the mind, you're all mentioning it, that this kind of upper section of quote unquote conveyance section is has been eroding over time, right? And so we've got a bit of an issue there. And again, we saw some notes on file. So this is further down, which is looking a little better, right? Nice. In the terminus section, maybe there's a little bit, kind of, backward eroding from the plunge pool forward. So we've got some things on the spillway, which we've all talked about. So, debris, maintain, right? We got to maintain that. Log boom, it's inoperable. That we need to fix. Pretty easy stuff. Concrete surfaces, we're just going to give it kind of a repair fail across the board. So, yeah, lots of issues there. And I would say even that concrete, with that little metal thing, you kind of ping it around and some voids could potentially be underneath it, right? So eroding or back cutting on the channel. So oftentimes anything that could be potentially hazardous or really concerning, right? We've read that the spillway might not be sized appropriately. We looked and the catchment size was pretty big. The 1 in 100 year notes that were on file was a pretty big flow, and it was sized for a 1 in 100 quite a long time ago. And we've had quite a bit of changing conditions in the watershed. So maybe this is, these are different terms that you use in the dam safety regulation. Both of them are ones that require follow-up and regulatory noting. So you have to let your dam safety officer know if you have a potential safety hazard, which is something that could lead to a problem down the road or could lead to a failure of something or part of the dam. This is hazardous conditions, something that's already kind of failed. So we already have, in my opinion, a failed conveyance channel, but it's still kind of potentially hazardous to the overall spillway. So I would probably put it in one of these categories. So it would require follow-up so that that recommendation isn't just a recommendation, but a recommendation that requires regulatory follow-up. So again, the same, the channel cross section of the conveyance section. And we did see some issues on the concrete as well. And then the energy dissipation, there was, a bit of back cutting and some sloughing, but nothing, minor repairs there. So anyway, this is some definitions of hazardous conditions and potentially hazardous or potential safety hazard per the regulation. And as you can see, they require follow-up. So I'm not going to get into detail there. But the last thing is a low-level outlet. We can look at these things. We can gate test it. We want to make sure it's locked. That is a requirement. So that's a check mark. We can measure this so that we know what the opening of the valve is. And, you can measure down to the water elevation. You can read it there. You can also do it on the outside of the vault because you will have some head loss across the gates. So you can actually get a more accurate elevation of the reservoir by looking on the outside. Again, we see a little bit of like undercutting, a little bit of erosion, maybe a low level or like a head wall or something would be better here, certainly because it's so close to the toe of the, because we had overlapping photos, right, from the downstream slope, right? We got potential issues, or not issues per se, but certainly risks to the dam. And we are looking at it. So I don't really like CSP in a pipe, but CSP certainly does work. It just, doesn't have as long a lifespan. And you can bring a GoPro or a pipe camera or something. You could also do that. So here's just some photos to see what a pipe through a dam like that might look like and have some issues. So just going quickly through here, it was secured and prevented authorization. Yes, this probably shouldn't be maintenance. Actually, that should be none. That might be just a little right in the wrong box. And just running through here. Low-level out structure, that's something we probably want to do. So these are just some examples of how you want to document this stuff and give yourself follow-up. The last thing is reservoir control. We really don't have anything to really speak about it. Moderate slopes, no real major hazards except for wind and wave. Certainly some debris whenever you have something this big. Water is going to naturally go where it is, where it's released into the spillway if the log boom's not there. And then finally, the instrumentation. It was in good condition, so we didn't really have any issues with those pieces of instrumentation. So one thing, we didn't have any seepage monitoring there, drains or V-notch weirs. So those are something we're going to want to recommend and add to this dam. So summary of takeaways, right? And remember, the idea is we've identified and made the records, and we've got all those boxes checked on the dam safety regulation. But we want to summarize those things so we can follow up on them. So the rest of that circle that makes up our dam safety management system needs to be closed. And so we need to write these things down and then initiate follow-up. So veg management, access across the spillway. We've got potential stability issues, slumping, we're not sure, right? But those are things that we've identified could be an issue. So we want to keep monitoring those, or, and the degree of the things we need to do here is going to vary. Someone asked about recording. Yes, it's going to be made available. It might not be on the website for some time. You could email info@interiordams.com, and when it's available, I can make it. I can make that available before it's posted up. And the major one is the spillway. The spillway is something we're going to want to follow up with the regulator and make a plan for. So again, the goal of surveillance is to identify deviations in performance so that corrective or risk mitigation measures can be implemented. So you got to follow up on maintenance and repairs, because that is a different but essential part of your dam safety management. So here's the thing, is if we don't follow up, what I liked about this particular dam, and a lot of them made up other stuff, but this particular dam did have a failure of that spillway. So if we recall, we only saw about 1 foot of water in that spillway ever in all of our freshet conditions. But we have wildfire, we have changing conditions, we have follow-up, cycles of wet cycles in BC. And under a major event, this particular dam had 5 feet of water going through the spillway. So, let's say it might have been in the area of a 1 in 200 year flood. So double what the design was. Oftentimes designs don't really think about maybe the tractive, components and things like that, and they only size them appropriately for a 1 in 100 year. And it could have been out of date, right? Their 1 in 100 year with the data they had then could have been very inaccurate. So we have spillway was compromised and failed. So imagine 5 feet of water going through that thing. It would be quite a terrifying event if your livelihood was on the line with something like this, or maybe you could potentially kill someone if this thing fails, right? It's a high consequence dam. So we need to follow up. This is the failure of the dam. So what happened was that eroding section down below just could not resist. So what happened is it just continued to undercut and erode bedrock. So this was all based on bedrock, and it managed to erode all of that bedrock. So had that bedrock been any less durable, this last little section would have been lost, and all of a sudden all this potential energy of the dam would increasingly be released. So this was very close to a complete failure of the dam, and it was something that our inspections maybe could have prevented. So next photo, you can see a massive rocks. If you were to go down there, some of these are 6, 7 feet in diameter, just get moved along like no problem. So imagine for 30, 40 years, you see nothing more than about a foot of water trickle through there, and then you see 5 feet of water. So just imagine if you're standing here, we've got water up to these slopes, just rifling down that slope. So we got to think about major events, and that's what our dams are designed for. We need to be inspecting them, thinking about these major events, whether they be seismic, extreme wind, and so forth. So I'm just going to fly through here because we are just over time, and see there really was like a little bit of debris in here, and this could have been gone. The owner was very on top of that with equipment and everything on site, mobile and riprap and so forth. And many repairs have been done since. And so this is just a perfect example of what inspection gives us. It gives us an opportunity every year to identify those things, and even if we're doing those things, to follow up. And following up does take time, capital costs, and many other things. And actually, right now, there's a big government funding stream that's going to be made available later this year. So there's lots of opportunity, even funding, to be able to follow up on this. So I am going to questions. I'm a solid 10 minutes over time, so I apologize. I'm going to go to the next slide and reserve questions for after. I'm going to stay a little bit longer, also just for the sake of recording. But here I'm going to paste this link if I can get to it. Yes, so questionnaire. If everyone could fill that link out, that questionnaire gives us feedback directly to the province to make the next resources, because we came up with this idea because someone provided this idea. And the provinces keep making these things available and give things that are valuable to you as a dam owner. So if you provide, it's just a quick check boxes. It'll literally take you 2 minutes, not even, probably 30 seconds. And also, if you would like to print off a certificate, it's already pre-signed and everything. All you need to do is click that other short URL, and you can print that off and just fill out your own name if you do like to track when you do complete these live ones, because these are not available when you take the on-demand ones. So, so go ahead and grab those. And I'd also just like to thank everyone. And again, note the sponsors and certainly the just the funding and the yeah, just all the agencies that have put this support together.